Banks are closing suspicious activity accounts. Are you on that list? I know some of our guests might be. This is Around the Blockchain. Thank you for joining. Please hit that like button. We have some great guests, and I really mean it. This might be the best show we've ever had, including a first-timer. You may catch him on the north side, but he's always keeping it moving. It is Mark Moss. Mark Moss, how are you doing? Welcome.
What's up, DZ? Thanks for having me, man. I'm excited. My first time here on the show. I'm not sure how this whole scoring system works, but we're going to win it either way.
How many shows give you Moss puns upon your intro?
None.
All right. Well, 1 point for DZ. Also on today, we have Scott Melker. Scott, how are you feeling today?
Good, man. How you doing?
Doing great. Then to wrap it up, we have Hotep Jesus. And Hotep, your last name's Jesus. I must ask, how was Easter?
Hotep, you're a genius. HotepJesus.com.
Absolutely amazing. Enjoyed the time.
All right. Well, let's pass on over. I was going to say, let's pass on over to that first topic. And banks passing on over some of their customers. What is going on with that? We have some shocking data about the number of suspicious activity reports that are going on in our banking system abroad. This is according to 2021. This is a study from Bank Policy Institute. 640,000 accounts were flagged and deemed hey, maybe something suspicious is going on here. Did a little bit of digging. The amount that saw a follow-up from law enforcement, 4%. So 1 out of 25 of the deemed suspicious accounts actually warranted. So out of one guilty party, we have 24 people seemingly just being thrown under the bus. I want to share a little anecdotal evidence as well. This is Todd Zolecki, and bank didn't shutter his account, but did shut him out from access to his own money. When asked why, they responded, "We can't tell you why. The only thing we can tell you is that it can take up to 60 days for this review." Now, Mark Moss, there's a lot to unpack here with the banks. They're shutting down. We don't know if it's crypto. Hey, you went on Tornado Cash one time 4 years ago. You're on our list now. Should we be obligated, in your opinion, to participate with banks to just be a part of our general and broader economy? Should that be a prerequisite to be a normal citizen?
Well, it certainly shouldn't. I think the people that are trying to impose these types of KYC, right, know your customer type obligations, actually show how little they understand about economics. And so what happens is, as a merchant, I would want to know my customer only in the old days when I used to extend them credit. So back in the old days when I would give my the local rancher credit or things like that, I would need to know them. I know where you live. Sure, I'll give you credit. Money took away the need for that. I no longer need to know my customer because they pay me upon receipt of the goods. Now, the customer needs to know me, the vendor, the merchant. They need to know that they can trust the goods, but money takes away the need to have that relationship. And so it shows how little they have understanding of economics. Now, of course, what they really want is control. There was a good article written by somebody I don't really agree with. I'll drop it anyway, Ben Hunt, and he was talking about the Treasury being like this all-seeing eye of Sauron. And basically, the goal of the Treasury is to see every single transaction that happens, and the reason why is, of course, because of control. And so as the government continues to get more and more corrupt, which we're accelerating at this point, the people start to get upset about that. And so they have to be able to maintain control harder and harder and harder. And so the way they do that is through financial means. Without the freedom to transact, there is no freedom, period. And so their goal is total control. Part of this, KYC system, of course, to your point, the SARS reports. The one good thing, of course, is that when everything's an emergency, nothing's an emergency. And so these banks have minimum amounts of SARS reports they have to fill out. And so they're doing like a DDoS attack on the Treasury, filling it with so many reports they can't get through them. So I guess that's good for us.
Yeah, and I was looking at the SARS reports from 2014 to 2021. Looks like about a 70% increase. And I'm glad you brought up corruption. Scott, I want to ask you about corruption with our Treasury and the Fed and, Fed now and central banking in general. As we potentially lose the dollar hegemony and as crypto emerges as a potential competitor to the traditional banking system, do you see the competitive nature leading to less corruption? Because now, now we have to compete with these other guys. Or is this just going to be leading to more corruption as they fight to hold on to their last vestiges of power?
if it led to less corruption, then we wouldn't see the White House taking an aggressive stance, multiple SEC enforcement action, the CFTC coming after Binance, the Treasury saying that Bitcoin and crypto are a threat to national security. Of course, it's going to cause more corruption because corruption only goes in one direction with the United States government, and that is up. I think everybody here can agree on that fact. And listen, I don't know whether they consider crypto a threat, whether they actually consider it a competitor. I don't think that the dollar is at risk of not becoming a global reserve currency anytime soon. I honestly think that that's a bit hyperbolic and overstated. But I do know that it's a war right now, and they have been not hiding in any way, shape, or form their attacks on our privacy and on our industry. I mean, just take a look at the Restrict Act. They used to actually hide these things and call them, the Patriot Act, and pretend that it was for our good and it was support America. Now they literally just say, we're going to restrict your privacy and punish you, and just put it right in the name. I mean, it's absolutely absurd. They're not hiding their intentions. It's very clear. And there's very few ways for your average citizen to protect their privacy and also just to protect their money at this point, right? I think that's why, to some degree, we've seen Bitcoin rising in this environment as we've seen banks fail. I mean, you talk about whether banks can come after you. They don't even have your money in the first place, right?
All right.
I mean, it's not there. That's been proven.
Yeah, fictional reserve banking is what we like to call it around on this show. Now, Hotep, some really good points there. He said protect. They keep wanting to protect. They want to protect our money. They want to protect our identity from, people stealing that and absconding and, opening up a bunch of credit cards. They just want to protect the citizenry. Should we take that at face value? What is the real objective if it isn't to protect people like you and me from losing all our money?
Well, as we know, it's the common phrase, the road to hell is paved with good intentions. When we look at the, I think it was September 22nd paper of last year, in regards to digital assets coming out of the White House, one of their calls to action was to assist people, right? Marginalized communities, underserved communities, et cetera, et cetera. So they'll always pose these financial policies under the guise of helping people. We also see that in the crypto community when we look at KYC. Regulation. Oh, this is to protect investors, blah, 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 blah. So they always do that. But really what this comes down to is the 3 C's. And Mark talked about one of them, which is control. The 3 C's are control, competition, and consolidation. When we look at the formation of the Federal Reserve Bank, you had Aldrich there, you had Morgan there, you had Warburg there, and several other actors. Well, what was one of their motives, one of the reasons why they wanted to create this central bank? Well, they couldn't compete too well when it came to interest rates. And you had some banks were practicing more reserves than the other. And if the guy down the street has more reserves than you do, obviously more people are going to bank with him. So they said, if we can consolidate, coming back to the third C, if we can consolidate power and we can basically level out interest rates and fix prices, then basically there is no competition, and they always want to destroy competition. And that's what we're seeing today. You're going to see in the future, 5 years, 10 years, the dissolving of small banks, independent banks. When we look at the FedNow technology is also basically eliminating competition such as Venmo, Cash App, et cetera, where you're going to do transactions basically directly with, it feels like the Federal Reserve, right? All the transactions are going to go directly through. So again, this is an example of consolidation of power, eliminating competition, and control, the 3 C's.
All right, if we
I love that. I want to jump in on that just real quick because
I'm glad. I was actually going to ask you a follow-up on that. What do you think of that consolidation of power? Is this a good thing because now all the banks are too big to fail, or is that a bad thing because now all the banks are too big to fail?
Well, they're good and bad, right? Everything's good and bad. And I think most people today just don't understand the nuance that's in these things. They're good for some people and they're bad for some people, right? Ultimately, they're bad, but there could be good. But I love what Hotep said right there. And I think it's important just to kind of drill back down on that for a second. Taking away the competition, the consolidation, as he says. So first of all, if you go back to before the Fed was created, you had this kind of era of free banking. And the Fed they were going out of business. And so the Fed said, hey, we'll backstop the banks. We need to create a system to do that. Part of the reason why the banks were going out of business all the time is because of the regulations that were put on them. So it wasn't ever really free banking. And one of the many regulations that was put on them that really hurt them was they were forced to buy government bonds. And when those bonds became worthless, they didn't have the money for the depositors. which is exactly what the problem is that we're having right now. The banks bought bonds and the bonds lost their value. So there's that problem. I think the other thing, though, about consolidating that power and going into sort of this like Fed now, the CBD type system that we have. I think one that I saw something this morning, Robert Kennedy Jr. He's now put his hat in the ring to run for president. Probably doesn't really stand much of a chance, but I'm bullish on him at least changing the conversation a little bit. But he put out a thing saying that the Fed's claim that President Biden claims that Fed now isn't a step towards a CBDC. If that, maybe we would believe that, but we're not. And he said that cryptocurrencies like Bitcoin give the public an escape route from the splatter zone when this bubble inevitably burst. So even him, he sees this and he sees what they're trying to do, trying to choke off the competition to Hope's point, this consolidation. And Bitcoin crypto gives us that route, but of course, they don't want that.
And the bubble reference came from Joe Biden. He was actually blowing bubbles at a South Carolina political rally there with the children there as he was sniffing. The bubble juice, of course. All right, well, let's get conspiratorial here. Scott, do you think that there's a push for these regional banks to consume a lot of this government debt, and maybe there's a little bit of a prediction that interest rates were going to hike exceedingly fast in a very, very short amount of time, and then these banks would have essentially toxic assets? Was there a push for them? I don't want to say a push to fail, but was there a dark plan behind it all?
I don't know if there was a dark plan or a push for them to fail, but they were certainly pushed to purchase toxic assets and behave like hedge funds. And regional bank managers, last I checked, are not very good hedge fund managers. And we've seen that proven over and over again. But yes, they were basically forced to have these assets, but they could have used shorter term treasuries to mitigate some of that risk. The fact is, nobody saw the bank run coming somehow, except for anyone who's a Bitcoiner. But certainly the Fed didn't see it. Certainly the FDIC didn't see it. Certainly none of them believed it would happen. I mean, you literally had the vice chairman of the FDIC saying the day before that no bank that they were regulating could possibly have a bank run after Silvergate, which, by the way, they regulate and he didn't realize, and before Silicon Valley Bank literally happened the next day. I mean, this is a clown show of epic proportions. Does it matter whether it's intentional or not, or whether they're going to shut them down? I mean, these banks are struggling to keep deposits. They're on their way out. There's no loans. There's no money going through the system. They're fundamentally broken at this point. You talk about consolidation and all these things. You forgot the fourth. It's corruption, right? We talked about it at the beginning. That's the fourth C. These guys are corrupt. They're incompetent. Government is an absolute mess. So more of these banks will inevitably fail. And let's not mention the fact that they literally just use their biggest bazooka they possibly have to backstop these banks unlimited, breaking like 100 years of federal, central bank policy and breaking everything that they did and put in place over the last 10 or 15 years to theoretically protect us. It's complete nonsense.
All right, well, it's complete nonsense. We are 6 likes away from 200. So if you guys want to help us out, hit that like button. And a big shout out to Presyn.io, our show sponsor. Now, Hotep, last thing on this topic here, I tend to agree with your assessment. Regional banks, they're facing a long march, hopefully, maybe over the cliff here. Is there anything we can do to help support regional banks, or is it really best to maybe just stay away from those things at the time being?
Oh man, I think that's a bad idea to try to support your regional bank. Although I get the motive and the desire to do that, maybe it's not a bad idea, but the future is crypto. Who needs a bank when you have crypto? So I don't see that as a viable solution. I think we need to have diversified digital assets. People can choose the coins that they want to spend at their different, shops, online shops, et cetera, et cetera. So I think crypto is the way to go. Also, in regards to Fed now, you had the Fed tweeted out the other day that the Fed now is not a CBDC. And that is true. It is not a CBDC. I think many people have made the mistake of conflating FedNow with a CBDC. I think the better analogy is FedNow is the railroad and the CBDC would be the train. And like I said before, the White House issued a memo on the CBDC, and it mentioned FedNow in there. So there is some relationship between FedNow and the CBDC, at least in the eyes of the White House. But the Federal Reserve is very sneaky, in fact, that they like to poach the bad takes from people when people say, oh, FedNow is a CBDC. But The best lies are lies that are come from omission. So it's like, what are the things you're not talking about? Also, the Fed made the statement and said that did not make the decision to implement a CBDC, and I thought that was a flat out lie. If I had to speculate, we know in fact that they definitely have those plans, and it was stipulated in the memo from the WhiteHouse.gov.
All right, all right. I was going to try to throw up a very, very
What
sneaky, sir, GIF. Mark, go ahead.
if we have time, back to the sneakiness, Hotep, I think at this point there's so much outrage over CBDCs. I mean, now we have lawmakers like Ted Cruz and many others putting laws into place, obviously Ron DeSantis in Florida as well, putting laws into place to prevent that. The people are outraged. We know we don't want it. Plenty of people are talking about that. And so sneaky, sneaky, sneaky. Of course, why would the Fed tell us it's a CBDC? We'll just call it Fed now. Ultimately, what is the definition of a CBDC? Obviously, we understand the dangers and how that works, but over 80% of all dollar transactions are done digitally anyway. We're already using digital money. So at what point does that line get crossed? And so I think very quickly they could just swap out some of that money in the bank account under something that has a little bit more control. Of course, they wouldn't call it a CBDC, not anytime soon, not until the outrage has kind of subsided from that. So it'll be interesting to see how that plays out.
All right. Well, let's move on to France and China. We have French President Macron heading over there despite burning in the streets, despite protests and riots over them, increasing the age from 61 to 63, 62 to 64, I believe, for the retirement age in France there. And I don't know if we could pull up the picture of them shaking hands right there, but he's attempting to bargain with Xi to, quote, reduce China's involvement in Ukraine and talk sense into Russia. Of course, this is after Joe Biden was just making statements saying the U.S. Europe, they are unified against Russia and Chinese propaganda, of course. Now, Macron, certainly not popular at home. Some might argue not popular abroad. Hotep, U.S., it seems like, hey, maybe we're trying to play some chess here, but do you think China is playing Go or maybe even 3D chess? Are we stuck behind while they're playing a 50-year plan? We're more worried about a 5-10-year plan?
Well, the truth is that the Chinese think very long term. We look at early China before they became the world power that they are. They were a backward agrarian society, and they turned that around in 100 years because they took a long-term economic outlook and started creating things that people needed, like shoes. Okay, so these people are definitely long-term planners, and they get it. As far as the Macron meeting with China, this is diplomacy games. You got to meet with people, you got to shake hands, kiss babies, all that stuff, go through the motions. Will something come of this? The answer is absolutely not. France is one of the original banks that Rothschild sent his son out to basically establish their banking syndicate. So we know France isn't going anywhere. So what's the play here for China? Well, the play here is basically throw a wrench in the plans, slow things down, make people second guess things. Give the Americans something to be concerned about. It's just a little mind game that they're playing, just to add a little bit of next level thinking, that whoever the economic powers might be, World Economic Forum, et cetera, whoever that might be. It's just a little game. And that's why I'm glad you called it chess or go, because that's exactly what it is a game. I wouldn't expect anything out of this meeting, but it's definitely just mind games.
And I do want to say we like people who play checkers, okay? Hit that like button if you only play checkers. That's fine too. Chess isn't for everyone. Personally, I've never played Go. All right, Scott, who is in a worse financial situation? Is it U.S., is it China, or is it France?
Oh, France. I mean, they have the higher inflation rate than the United States. They have people literally burning things in the street over raising the pension from 62 to 64. I mean, can you imagine if rioters walked into the BlackRock offices in New York City and started lighting things on fire? Man, come on. Yeah, I would say that France is in the worst predicament here. And it makes sense then that Macron is doing exactly what he's doing. He's trying to thread the needle and play both sides. And frankly, listen, I'm not a fan, but frankly, who can blame him, right? We always approach things in this country as America first and assume that everybody has our same agenda. But the fact is that it probably makes sense for France to have friends on both sides, depending on who they believe could be the winner or either, and to do business with both and to make obvious statements about staying out of wars that are none of their business, right? And so I think that there's a lot of truth to the things he said. We're obviously freaking out of it in the United States because we want Macron to be Biden's little dog, I guess, but that's just not how the world works at this point.
All right. Well, Mark Moss, earlier you had said, the dollar losing hegemony may be a little bit overblown. A lot of people are pointing to situations like this, recent events, and saying, no, this is clearly happening. What would you say to the critics who are saying this is inevitable and this is going to happen soon?
Well, let's jump back. I want to jump back a little bit and comment back to the question that was posed to Hotep about the China-France situation and even with the protests that are happening there. So I think there's a little bit more context that's needed. So sure, they're rioting because the retirement age got moved up by 2 years. That's part of it, right? There's always more to it. Part of it is this authoritarian creep. Part of it is this high inflation, of course, obviously. But the bigger piece, why did they storm BlackRock's office? Where does BlackRock fit into this, right? They're not just mad at Occupy Wall Street here. And it's because of the deals that Macron made by losing money. BlackRock made a bunch of bad deals, and basically Macron used the pension reforms to bail BlackRock out and now raise the age. And so all those people know their money's lost. So not only do they have to work longer, but now they're most likely their money's going to be gone. That's why there's real outrage. As far as the deal with China, I don't think anyone trusts China, but people don't like the United States either. The whole world is ganging up on the United States right now. And the deal with France goes back, obviously it goes back pretty far, but we can go back really towards the signing of the IRA, the Inflation Reduction Act. And so in that Inflation Reduction Act, basically President Biden of the United States put in a policy that says things have to be purchased or manufactured in the United States. And so basically we shunned Europe, and France, specifically Macron, was very, very angry about that. He went around the world yelling, saying this is an attack on Europe. We're supposed to be united. We're supposed to have this union, and now you won't do any business with us anymore. Companies are leaving Germany, they're leaving France, and they're coming to set up in the United States specifically because of the IRA deal. In addition, the United States also did deals with Australia and the UK to build submarines and things like that, and left France out of that. So France has been rebuked. They're pretty upset about the situation, as is a lot of Europe. And this goes into my bigger thesis that the world is starting to break apart. So the world is turning against the United States. To Scott's point, they want to be friendly. They want to play both sides of the aisle. They want to be a diplomat, if you will. I don't think anybody trusts China, though. And so it's really about trying to play both sides. As far as the dollar losing its reserve status in the world, first of all, there's nothing to replace it. CNN talked about it. They did a video, and if someone at CNN is talking about the dollar losing reserve status, it must be getting to the highest levels. But he said, we searched the world over for a replacement, and there is none. And so I think that's really the key piece. So it's like there's nothing to replace the dollar as the reserve asset. China, the yuan is now being used for trade, but they don't want to have a reserve asset currency. There's a lot of negative problems that happen from being the reserve asset in the world, the Triffin's dilemma, as it's called. And so there is no replacement. Now, the dollar is being used or losing global trade. So we're seeing oil being settled in yuan and things like that. But it's not the reserve. The reserve is where people put their savings, not currency, where you put your savings. Now, we have seen over the last 15 years or so, the amount of foreign buying of U.S. treasuries is trending down, and the amount of gold buying is trending up. And so from a reserve asset standpoint, we see it trending down, but there's a long way to go, in my opinion.
Mark, quick question. Do you think that any Bitcoin buying by sovereign nations is hidden? I've heard things, and that maybe suggests that. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I mean, certainly if they were buying it, they would certainly hide it, just like they hide their gold. So China hides how much gold they have, so does Russia. So if they're buying it, they would certainly hide it. From that point of view, though, I think most nations have seized it. So a lot of nations hold a lot of Bitcoin that they've actually taken. So rumors are China has a bunch. Of course, we know lots of other countries in Europe have a bunch as well, even the United States, which has now started selling it, which I think will turn out to be a big blunder. But if they were buying it, they would certainly be hiding it, in my opinion. Of course, unless they're El Salvador. I think we'll start to see over the next year or two, we'll start to see a lot of the kind of tier 3 nations, the El Salvador type nations, starting to buy. So we'll start to see that. The big countries, the needle movers, we probably won't see any announcements, but they're holding it, and they should probably continue to hold it.
Scott, good follow up on that. What do you think? Just random sovereign nation X. What are they doing? Are they buying more Bitcoin or seizing more Bitcoin if they were to have a hidden reserve?
I think 99% of them have never heard of Bitcoin, don't care about Bitcoin, and aren't thinking about Bitcoin at all. And we're in our little echo chamber if we believe that it's relevant to them. And frankly, listen, it's relevant to me. United States, as he said, seized Silk Road's Bitcoin, is selling all 50,000 of them. They announced it. By the way, they sold 10,000 of them and price didn't even move. So can everybody just shut up about all of the FUD about what happens when governments and Mt. Gox creditors and everybody else sells their Bitcoin. It doesn't matter. Right. It's a highly liquid market. So just shut up with the stupid narratives. But I want to just circle back really quick to the dollar hegemony argument. The dollar's not going anywhere, first of all. B, everyone's talking about the Chinese yuan replacing the dollar. The Chinese yuan is pegged to the dollar, right? It's literally, if they let the Chinese yuan float in value, it would collapse immediately and none of this would happen. The dollar's not going anywhere. And if the dollar collapses, we're literally living in like Mad Max Waterworld, or we're going to be Tribute in the Hunger Games, because it's going to be the last thing to fail and we're all completely screwed if that happens.
Yeah, it is pegged to the dollar. Very important point. Very, very important point there. Hotep, follow up on that. What are your thoughts on sovereign nations? I mean, do you think none of them are buying? What about intelligence agencies for, hidden operations?
Well, if you're an intelligent investor, plug for Benjamin Graham there. If you're an intelligent investor, what you would do is you would diversify assets, and you would definitely diversify your investments in something like Bitcoin. So I would imagine that many nations hold Bitcoin and maybe even other assets. In regards to the dollar, BRICS is strengthening the dollar, is my theory. What we're seeing from the news about, the collapse of the dollar, no, it's making the dollar stronger. If we did a look back and looked at every single time there was a panic or something that happened in our economy, the banking syndicate of America got stronger. It got more consolidated. It got more power. It got more centralized. So when I look at people saying the dollar is failing, I'm saying, well, it might be failing you, but for the powers that be, it's not failing. It's doing exactly what they want it to do.
All right. Like Alabama, everything is relative. If, we have 10% inflation, but our neighbor has 11%, we look like an attractive investment opportunity there. All right. Well, let's talk about war games. We have a little, I was going to say fun. We have a pretty dire map I wanted to show everybody. And this is Taiwan Air Defense Identification Zone, ADIZ. You can see it right here. And there have been multiple incursions by Chinese military aircraft. It looks like 80 of them just in 2 days, folks. You can see here, whoa, went in a little bit deep right there. Here, coming in pretty close to the land. So over the weekend, surrounding the island nation of Taiwan. Of course, Taiwan, very strategically important due to the amount of chips that they process for everything from your cell phones to your vehicles to, the PC and laptops you have at home. Mining, you name it, they're building it over there. TMSC, love great stock there. But they ended the 3 days of military drill saying they tested their military capabilities under actual combat conditions, practicing precision strikes and blockading the island that Beijing views as its own. Now, Mark Moss, I understand it's a very dicey subject with a huge swath of the globe here. What are your thoughts about Taiwan, and why is it strategically important to the U.S. and the West?
Well, it's strategically important to the United States for a number of reasons, specifically, as you already kind of pointed out, with the chips that are being produced there. That there's a big plan to bring the chips manufacturing back to the United States under the CHIPS Act that President Biden signed. The problem is it takes time. So over the next couple of years, we'll see that coming online. But for now, we still need Taiwan to produce those chips. China also needs the chips because the U.S. took away China's ability to have chips. So there's 3 basic levels of chips, starting from the most basic, might be in your alarm clock, all the way up to an iPhone might be the most complex. And so basically, the U.S. put a restriction on China to not be allowed to have any of the tier 2 or tier 3 chips, which are the most advanced chips that they need. And they're not allowed to have any equipment to service or manufacture the chips or any of that. And so that kind of put China back to the dark ages. And so that's basically an act of war. Put them back to the dark ages. And so China needs to have that technology. And so one way to do that is to go get Taiwan. I think this goes... so they need those chips. Now, people in the United States and Taiwan said before they let them fall under China's control, they would burn them down. So they couldn't let them get that technology. In addition, even though Taiwan manufactures the chips, 80% of the designs for the chips come from the United States. 85% of the sand to make the best microprocessors comes from North Carolina. So even if China took control of Taiwan, they still wouldn't have the designs or the silica sand they would need to do that. So I don't know. I think some of it also goes back culturally. It's hard to say. And I think also, man, when 2 dogs want a bone, it may just be a bone, but 2 dogs want it.
All right. And shout out to the North Carolinian Sand Hills over there. The Wright brothers. Anybody with their name Wright in their last name, please hit that like button. Nick, where are we at on that, by the way? 369 rookie numbers. Let's get up to 420, folks. All right, Scott, there's a little bit going on here. This may have precipitated the, Beijing's move here. It looks like Taiwan's president, Tsai Ing-wen, I believe I'm saying that right. They met with House Representative Leader McCarthy. So he came to America, then Beijing saying this is response to that. Do you think this is just simple saber rattling going on, just with their neighbor? Or is this maybe a little bit more serious escalation happening here?
I mean, I left my Pentagon credentials at my old house. So to be frank, I don't really know. You were talking about chips. I was hoping they don't make Fritos because those things are crack. And I don't want them to cut us off. But yeah, I mean, to me, it's always saber rattling until it's not, right? A lot of people thought that Russia was saber rattling with Ukraine. Obviously, that wasn't the case. But we have seen jockeying of position around Taiwan for years. And I think that any move of diplomacy between the United States and Taiwan is viewed as a front to the Chinese. But of course, once again, it's kind of like Taiwan is in an impossible situation and is trying to thread the needle there as well. I mean, right now, I would say it's saber rattling, right? It's not unusual for countries to flex their power with military moves and practice and exercises. And that's probably what that is right now. It's just a bit concerning, I would say, to see it escalating at this point, because this does seem like a more aggressive stance by them. And of course, you just have to wonder if China has been empowered at all by what they've seen from Putin and Ukraine. But once again, man, listen, I like to talk about crypto. We could talk about golf if you want, but I'm not winning this today because I am not an expert on Taiwan. So I think you should let Hotep and Mark just have at it. No,
you brought up some good points there. And I think they just need to sit down and listen to Race Rumored and make a no flex zone. Hotep, what do you think the attack? What do you think the attack vector might be for, some kind of conflict? Would it be a kinetic war on the ground? Would it just be a blockade? Or would it potentially be cyber warfare where we might not even know what's really going on?
So today, most wars are fought culturally. For example, if the United States wants to take over your country, the first thing they're going to do is drop bombs of pronouns on your nation. And that's how they're going to destabilize the control your government has over your people by causing all these different little mini cultural wars. You see that here in America. So if China is going to go into Taiwan, I would expect not direct conflict with battleships, et cetera, but some sort of intelligence subversion is what I would expect. Maybe in the forms, definitely not pronouns, because China's not doing that, but something similar to that effect. Now, if we want to understand any military conflict, I think you got to run this past game theory, the prisoner's dilemma, and Nash's equilibrium. And when we look at Taiwan and China, I'm not exactly sure where we are in Nash's 4 quadrants or whatever. It looks like an equilibrium point where it's probably not beneficial for either side to change what they're doing and to enter into war. Even like with Ukraine, right? The way that America is fighting Russia, they're doing it through a proxy, right? So if I'm looking at China in a Taiwan conflict, I would expect them to do it through a proxy. The Charlie Indigo Alpha would start a revolution in the country and destabilize it that way. Maybe China would go about that means. But I think you got to run this through game theory and see, what is it that China benefits from going to war with Taiwan? What do they lose? What are the trade-offs for Taiwan as well? And then, come to a conclusion from that.
All right. No, great point with the pronoun war there. I do want to share. I identify as he, him, and Winnie the Pooh. Mark Moss, I believe you ended up taking it home. It was a great episode. Guys, hit that like button if you enjoyed what we were doing today. Don't worry. We'll talk Bitcoin tomorrow, I swear. Mark Moss, feel free. You got the most points in that little corner over there. And that basically means you get to leave us with some parting thoughts. So, Mark, please spend 10, 20 seconds. Tell us what you got going on and maybe spit some wisdom for us.
Yeah, well, I'll finish up. We talked a lot about some scary things and destabilization of power, decentralization of the world, et cetera. And I would just say that the world is changing. It is rapidly changing to kind of the point that Hotep made in the beginning. We don't need to support the banks. Support yourself. Get your money out of the banks. Get your money out of the reach of the government. That's what Bitcoin is for. We have the ability to save our money and transact our money without fear of censorship. And so take advantage of that. Protect yourself first. Get your money out of the banks.
All right, what's your channel on iHeartRadio where you got your show on?
Yeah, man, check it out. Just at one Mark Moss on social media, and just search the Mark Moss Show, and you can find my all my shows there.
All right, love to hear it. All right, that's all we have time for, folks. Make sure you go into the description, check out the links. You can check out everyone's content. Everyone is putting out really, really good stuff. And until next time, that's all we have. Easy out.